You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
Very, very, very excited to have a good friend of mine, Melvin Kenny, on the podcast. Melvin is a strength and conditioning and performance specialist.
Yeah,
So, Melvin, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about you?
We're good. We're good. We're good.
Good.
Just for people who don't know, what is the difference between strength and conditioning and performance? What's the difference between a performance specialist and, let's say, just a personal trainer?
So the reason why I say performance specialist is because we kind of personal training is just like I think it's vague, and it's just when I say strength coach and performance specialist, that I'm trying to say that like there's more. I'm covering more than just lifting. So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
say strength coach and performance specialist, because there's also like running mechanics, jumping, Olympic lifting. There's other components into it, so that's why.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So tell me why. So you specialize in basketball. So
Yeah,
give
specialized
me
in
who.
basketball. Yeah.
So who just for the general audience, who is Melvin Kenny and why basketball?
Why basketball? Melvin Kenny is just a simple guy that loves basketball. So before I even started as a coach, I was in business school, and I guess I wasn't really into like business. So I was mostly into training. So that's why I dropped out of school, and then I went to a training. I started with some internship, and then where I'm working is CoreXcellence, and that's where I did my second internship. And throughout that internship, that's where I was exposed to hockey players, but I was also exposed to basketball players. And then I started. So our director of athletic development, um, Don White, he's really into like make sure that you know buy you try to get the buy-in out of athletes, and I felt that I had more buy-in when it came to basketball, because I've always been interested into basketball, even though that even though football is my main sport.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's why I've always been drawn to basketball. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't good, but I was always
Yeah.
interested. So yeah,
Trust me, me neither. Me neither. But
no way.
you end up coaching afterwards, so you
But
you do a better job at kind of like using the sport, but like in your own way. So with you, it's helping people with their bodies. With me, it's kind of like um, I kind of try to use more of a holistic approach. Like
okay,
I just want to really build character when I coach, right? So for
yeah,
me, like it's not really about like how good you can be at basketball. For me, it's more about how great of a person you could be and
yeah,
understand just the social aspect of it, right? So everybody uses the sport in
yeah,
their way, so that's really fun. So
exactly.
so I wanted to get you on because this is a crucial time in um, the athletic development of basketball players,
Yes.
and you're going into the off season. I kind of wanted you to come on and just explain in terms of off season, right? What does a plan like? What does a plan look like for somebody who, let's say, wants to take strength and conditioning more seriously? Like, what would
So
you? What does a
so
plan have to entail? Yeah.
so we have to think about it that you want to get you want to have a reset when you're during your off season. Like you always set up yourself in the position where you just like the knees out. You always like you're always in those positions in basketball, and you're trying to get those reset. You want to get to those positions, but can you go back to like a neutral position? So that's the goal. You want to make sure that you have this in the beginning, and then from there, once you're able to reset, then you build up from on top of that, where in your program makes you more resilient,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when you build the strength, where that's going to transfer to your like explosiveness. That's where that's where you begin to become a more bouncy, and then yes, that's how you that's what you have that's sorry about that, that's what you want in your program. And also you're gonna squat, you're gonna do some deadlift, those type of exercises, but also you want to also have some single leg strength in it, because you want to make sure you even out the strength between the left and and the right when it comes to your leg, and also when it comes to your upper body. So you want to make sure you have all these separate components where,
Yeah.
like I said, reset, build up where you build up like the hypertrophy, but which would help you with your resilience. Then you build the strength, which is going to transfer to your like vertical and the way you sprint, and
Yeah.
and then you build single leg strength. So that's how we do it at CoreXcellence.
Yeah. It's so funny because I think that a lot of players kind of just see working out as just a reason for me to get more bounce, right?
Yeah,
They just think
that's
I
what
want to
they
jump
think.
higher. I want to jump
That's what they
higher.
think. Yeah,
Hmm.
but you have to have a like a strength term that we call it periodization. You have to have like a plan. It has to have like you can't always train at the same intensity always at the same intensity. It has to vary a bit.
Hmm.
It has to
So
vary. And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, so that's very interesting. You're saying periodization. So like, if I am a new client, I come
Mhm.
to you, right? Take me through your process. What is the first thing that you would do with a new client?
So whenever we have a young athletes, some of these athletes will get assessed by our athletic director. But what I want to see is that kid is able to squat. That squat is going to give me some idea of where he is when I assess him. So it's a basketball player. So uh, when he's when how does his feet look like when he squat?
Hmm.
Does he have if you see when he goes to a squat and then he goes always to his toes, well, there's probably some lack of mobility around the ankle. Um, Whenever he goes down and then he has difficulty getting the knees out. Is there something with his hips going on? So stuff whenever he goes down low and then he's bending over, is there a lack of core stability? So um, with a squat, you can see a lot of stuff when
Hmm.
you assess. So a squat is a good um, idea of how that person plays on defense when when they're how they play
Yeah.
on defense, how they jump, and
Hmm.
yes. So yeah, so a
Yeah.
squat. That's the first thing that I do when I assess a basketball player.
Hmm. So, it's interesting what you're saying because like I think it's not the same thing when you're going to go see somebody like you guys at Core Excellent. You guys have been doing a great job. I've been hearing a lot about you guys.
Yeah.
Um, it's very interesting that you're saying that because an assessment at the beginning, for somebody who wants to get better at their specific sport is probably not the same assessment that a general public person is going to go do, if the person just, let's say, just wants to get fit,
You
right?
know what's fun? You know what's funny? It's funny
Mhm.
because sometimes like we treat all our customers as athletes, but the reason why is because sometimes you look at adults, and what you see when you train general population, it kind of helps you also with athletes. So you
Mm.
can't really discriminate. So I think one of the common mistake that you see with like strength coach that wants to start, they're like,
Mhm.
okay, I want to train athletes, and Don White, which is the director of the athletic development and the owner of CoreXcellence, he said like you shouldn't do that because you can learn from um, uh, a general like an adult, and
Yeah.
you can apply the same thing to an athlete
Right.
and the other way around. So you can't really discriminate whenever you train athletes and adults,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you can do you can do the same thing with an adult, the same thing you do with an athlete, but it's at a different intensity. Look, I'm not gonna say like, look, I'm gonna start making like a clean with some power cleans with an 80-year-old, but there's another way of applying it.
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to like basketball players, like, um, when it comes to basketball players and just creating those plans, right?
Mhm,
Um, what are like, say I don't have access to a personal trainer,
mhm.
right? I don't have access to a personal trainer. I go to the gym by myself, right?
Yeah.
What is the important parts that I actually have to be able to look at? What should I like what to get the most but out of my sport,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that I need to incorporate in my workouts?
Uh, the same way, let's say you have problem with basketball, always go back to the fundamentals. So when
Mhm.
it comes to the strength, like learning how to train, you start with the fundamentals. So the fundamentals that you have to learn is you have your squats, lunges, deadlifts, push horizontal like push-ups, push
Yeah.
vertical, which is like pushing overhead. You have your horizontal pull, which is like row, vertical push, which is would be like pull-ups,
Mhm.
everything overhead, and you have your core. You have a core stability. So you have to think of these components. You have to cover these components in order to have pretty much everything in your strength program. So that's
Mhm.
always go with the fundamentals. There's a
Fundamentals.
lot of stuff. There's a lot of like videos on Instagram, on
Right.
YouTube that may
Right.
confuse a lot of people, but
Right.
just stick to the fundamentals, and that's gonna help you become. That's how it's
Right.
gonna your athletic development is gonna transfer to your game.
Right. So let me ask you this, like, and I hope I don't put you on the spot, but like, let's say, what would a week look like if I'm hitting all those like fundamental movements, right? If I am somebody who, let's say, doesn't have access to a personal trainer, how would I break up my week? Like just a
How would you?
general, like,
Okay,
like if I have no guidance whatsoever.
okay, so I just enumerated all of them, so it wouldn't all be in a day or within a program. So you would have let's say the first day you would have like a squat, which would be also called like a knee dominant exercise. That would be your
Mm-hmm.
main lift, and then you on the second day your main lift would be a deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
And then on your third day, you would have a lateral squat, or just to start.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like that would be how, that's how you would separate your main lift in your 3 days. And then from there, the upper body exercises would be like your accessory. You would put this on like a second complex.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that would be that's how you would separate it in the program.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like an example of like what kind of like so I want people to understand this. When you say accessory and complex, what are those things? What does it mean for somebody
So
who is listening doesn't have access?
So a main lift, so your main lift, that's the focus of the day. So we at CoreXcellence, we when
Mhm.
we say main
Without giving too much of the secret, but like
without giving it too much, but your main lift is the one where you're gonna put a lot more effort. That's where you
Mhm.
put most of the effort during the day, and then the accessory, the other the strength complex. That's the part where it's not gonna be as intense, but you'll do it, and that's gonna help you. That's the stuff that's gonna help you become more resilient.
More resilient.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are some of the benefits that you have for being, if somebody is consistent with their strength and conditioning, what are some benefits that they would have
The
that the
benefits. I
person would
mean,
be able to benefit? Yeah.
Uh, they're less, I would say, less prone to injuries. We
Mm-hmm.
you can't really like control injuries when it comes to like it just happens like that. But from what I've seen with the athletes that we've had here, when they go throughout their year, they might have like some small pains and stuff like that, but there's no injuries that affect their playing time. So
Mm.
that's a good thing because you see a lot of kids they'll come in and be like, okay, like I can't play because my knee's bothering me a lot. Sometimes it could be due to like tightness, or sometimes because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have strong hamstrings. And it could be both. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they're training often during the year, it helps them be less prone to injuries, so it doesn't affect their playing time. There's also the fact that a guy that started, let's say, the off season. Okay, I want to be bouncy. I want to have this amount of vertical jump. Well, they'll be able to maintain it throughout the year. They won't see a change. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to the end. They're like, okay, like I'm not able to jump the same way I started.
Yeah.
So you maintain your athleticism throughout
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
season. So which is the
And
thing. And also when I said about the reset, which is an important component in the off season, well, when you train during the season, well, you still have a pretty decent mobility. When it comes to your hips, when it comes to like having overhead, because a lot of basketball, well, in basketball, most of the time you have to block a shot, go for a shot, and what it does is that it makes it that like your back muscle, which like your lat here, it's tight, so it's like some guys like you see, but when
you
you
can't.
say, yo, get your hands above your head,
Yeah,
they can go
yeah,
there instead of
yeah.
like having here.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So just let me just say, so what Melvin was showing me is those who are listening won't be able to see. So Melvin is showing me is that sometimes with the lats, which is the lower part of the back, like kind of like the mid part
So yes, like you
beneath the
see that
shoulder.
big muscle.
Yeah,
Like if you just
yeah.
grab, like you just grab there, like that's your lat right there. That's a big
Right,
muscle. Like
right,
if
right,
like in basketball, you use it a lot just for blocking,
right,
going
right,
for shots. So if that gets tight, you're
right,
not gonna have the same range.
right. So
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 that's
so
what.
that's what Melvin is showing. It's that if that muscle is tight, what ends up happening is you don't have the same range to be able to go up and block shots, because when you raise your arm up, instead of being able to raise it all the way up to your ear, now it's kind of like to the front
Yeah,
of your, so you're kind of like missing on, and that kind of limits you in situations where you probably can't, you're missing a couple inches to dunk, right? You're probably to be able to block a
yeah.
shot, right?
But
Sometimes
also,
even to
yeah,
generate power. Yeah.
yeah, but also that's where like as an athlete, one thing that I've learned is that comes from our director, Don White. He says like the body will always find the path of least resistance, like a
Yeah.
river.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll go through some compensation, and when you go through a lot of compensation, you're more at risk of going to some type of injury. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's that's big right there. So let me ask you this. Like if let's say somebody came to see you, right? And that person is, let's say, a 5'11" point guard, right?
5'11", yeah.
5'11" point guard, and then you have a 7 foot center.
Mhm.
How do those two training plans how do they differ? How are they different?
So it's a good question. Um, they could go through the same program, but I'm not gonna um, I'm not gonna expect something from the sender the same way as your undersized, like some like the undersized guard. So
Mm-hmm.
the perfect example would be the squat. Um, you're 7 foot. You don't. I'm not gonna expect them to go. Let's say for a squat, like for a squat depth to go like ass to grass. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would stack up some box and go at. I'm trying to get like parallel, at least parallel to the ground. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would trying to get from that basketball player, and from the 5'11" guard. Well, I'm trying to get possibly a little lower his squat depth
Yeah.
compared to
Mm-hmm.
the center. So that's how it would be different. I wouldn't try to get him to a position where it's kind of like close to impossible to get him there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how it would be different.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, if you're trying to get, man, we could go all day on this. It's funny because the weight room and just strength and conditioning in general is an area that I started really understanding and appreciating
Mhm,
how much
mhm.
effort and how much of a difference it makes in players' game. And every time like
Yeah,
every time parents come see me, whether their child is 12, 13, 14,
mhm.
or whatever, I always say that for me, what I've noticed is the separator is you could tell those that do some kind of strength and conditioning,
Yeah,
because you kind of feel like mentally they're on a different level. They feel stronger.
yes,
They don't get bumped off. Like right, you're driving to the basket, because the reality is like when you're driving to the basket, somebody hits you.
mhm.
The ones that are not as strong, they'll get bumped off at that first
Yeah,
contact. But you can
yeah.
tell that the really strong ones, they'll initiate, they'll embrace the first contact, and then they'll kind of like it's the second contact
They'll
when
go.
you're able
Yeah,
to, yeah,
they'll just
so.
go. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. And I think one thing when it comes to athletic development, um, it has a huge mental impact
Mentally,
on the
100%,
basketball player that it
100%.
feels like it just changed the way they approach the game, just like mentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they're willing to do a bit more. They're willing to do stuff that they weren't
Mm-hmm.
willing to do before.
Yep. Yep. The mental component of it for sure. Yeah. Are there some things that certain players do on the basketball court that you um like that you kind of notice? Like, because the one thing, and I encourage, if you are anywhere in the Montreal area, I encourage you guys to go see Melvin, because I have seen his work, and I have seen the effect that his work has on certain athletes when they start working out with him. So kudos to you, keep up the good job.
I
But
appreciate that. Thanks.
one thing I noticed with Melvin is that Melvin goes out and he supports his players, right? So not only do you train them in the gym, but you actually go see them play,
Yeah,
right?
it's
That
yeah.
that's pretty cool. That's like incredible. So my question to you is this: has there ever been what's your process to go into the games? Like, do you go to the games to see how what you're doing in the weight room, how it's translating on the court, or do you kind of go to the games, assess the player, and then you're able to make your weight room session better, right? Or like, what is the relationship between you being able to go see them, and how does it make your strength and conditioning session better?
So it's a good question. So I watch the games just for entertainment, one, and then two, I get to see how they move, and yeah, from the way they move, you can have an idea of like, okay, what to take into consideration the for the next session or for the next month. So that's how I watch games,
Mm,
and how can I say it? Uh, yeah, and it's my way to support. Like I'm
to
like
support
some I train you, and I kind of feel also like I'm like a fan of
100%. I know
what
exactly what you're talking. I know
yeah, it's
exactly
like
what
I
you're
don't
talking
know. It's like I'm invested the same way
about.
you play this game, the same way you kind of have dreams of like making it to a certain level. I'm like, okay, like I like what you do as a basketball player, and at the same time, like yo, I want to see you achieve these things, and I want to see how you know how you approach adversities. You know, when
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
throughout those. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's
I'm like you're a fan.
It's 100%. Me too. Don't worry, me too. Because like I
But it's
think
like
like
you're.
what
Go ahead.
no, I'm saying because it's almost like um the athlete then sees that, yo, my strength and conditioning coach came to my basketball game. So in their minds, they make that link that both of them might go together, right?
Yes,
So
it
that's
does.
it's insane. Yep.
It does. You kind of see how they do stuff, and yeah, is you see how they jump, and you're like, okay, like you know that okay because he's jumping a certain way. Well, you have to approach the training in a certain way so that you know he does it better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even like
100%.
you see stuff, you're like, okay, like even also it you know like you were saying how you gonna program this how you gonna program me to a guard that is 5'11" in the center. Sometimes it's not it's about also how you communicate the program to the basketball player so that he understand, okay, that's how this exercises will transfer to my game.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's mostly about the way it's mostly the psychology than the okay just the okay
100%.
the program, the X and O's kind of, you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 100%. 100%. Melvin, we are getting to that point where it's time to debunk a little myth.
Yeah,
We talked about this a little bit off air before.
yeah.
So if I am a parent, right? A lot of times, like, how do you sell a parent on letting a young athlete train? Because I'm sure everybody heard the myth.
Yes.
And again, I'm not the professional you are, right?
Mhm.
But from what I hear, there is a myth out there that if young children start training young, it will stunt their growth.
Yes. It's still to this day it's still a myth that look it's still a thing that people are worried about.
Because some parents are hesitant to let their kids even start training.
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit, like the myth, where did it start? How does it affect? When's the good time to, let's say, start letting a child start training,
Mhm.
right? And what kind of training do they have to do? Because the training that I would do with, let's say, somebody who's 11 is not the same for somebody that is like 18, 19, 20-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to like, well, if they want to start training, you have to start with the basic, like I said previously. But look, the myth started because I've heard the myth when I did, because I had a podcast during the pandemic, and I've interviewed one of the world-renowned strength coach in the United States, and well, he's world-renowned. So he showed me an article, and the article was saying how um, it started in 1970s in
Mm-hmm.
Japan, when researchers were making a research on like child labor, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no data that's saying like, okay, that it stunts your growth. It came from the child labor, and the way they concluded that all that training stunt their growth is that they just looked at all the children in those factories, and they were saying, well, we saw all these children, and from what we've seen, the common denominator is that they're all small, they're all
Mm-hmm.
short. So that's how they concluded, like, okay, that's why if you lift heavy weights, well, it's gonna stunt your growth. But when you look at, I guess, since 2000, you'll see there's a lot of research saying like they do like a 10-week, 12-week program, and then after this they make their research, and they conclude that it doesn't affect it doesn't stunt their growth, but it has actually some positive impacts on their growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so if, let's say, I'm a parent, right? I'm a parent. Um, my kid doesn't have any experience at training. What kind of training is appropriate, let's say, for that age?
Well, the
Does
like I
it
said,
does it does it even matter, like, what the age is, like, or is it more like the training age of the person, like how
the training
much they
age
do? Mm-hmm.
the training age matters, but whenever they come in, well, at first, can you just learn how to lift your own body? That's the first
Mm-hmm.
thing. Before you even add anything, can you hold your own body? And you can just
Mm-hmm.
look, when you sit down, that it's like squatting, right? Let's say I tell you to
Mm-hmm.
sit down 10 times. It's squatting when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a squat without weight, and that's a start right there. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it, it's like when you play a sport, the impact, there's a bigger impact on the kid's body than when you lift. So there shouldn't be as much of a worry when it comes to training, when it comes to like a teenager training.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and look, if let's say a parent is not too comfortable, another way to develop your child is to play many sport. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest mistake that parents are doing with their kids is that they're like, okay, my son, I want my son to only play basketball. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's being one dimensional. And if you look at all the pros, all the pro athletes, they've started with a sport. They've played many sports. Some of them, they probably
Right.
just played soccer, and then after a while they said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to play basketball. Some played basketball, football, baseball, and other sports. And with with those sports, they cover different type of movements that there aren't in basketball. So that's
Mm-hmm.
right there, could be an athletic development for your kid if you don't want them to train yet.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like you said, a lot of these movements are transferable. So I'll give you an example. When I first started coaching,
Mhm.
I coached grade 5 and grade 6, right?
Okay.
So obviously I had some skilled players that could make shots and all that stuff, but my best defender was somebody who played soccer.
Right.
So just them being able to kind of like learn how to anticipate, learn how to get back in front of people,
Yeah.
learn how to cut
Yeah.
off angles and that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
they were light years ahead. Just that movement of running back on defense and whatever,
Yeah.
like that was so it's very interesting. So I actually, I'm gonna steal one. I have a question for you. Like, this is just
Right?
for my general knowledge, and I hope it could help people. So, we're kind of in this in an era where everybody's kind of like sitting. We sit a lot. We probably
Mhm.
don't move as much. We're on our phones and all that stuff, right?
Yes.
Um, I've noticed that, and this is because I have a personal training background as well, so I know a
Okay,
little
I
bit
didn't
about this.
know.
Yeah, yeah. So I noticed that especially in basketball players,
Mhm.
the weakest part, or the part that they need to work on the most, a lot of times it's hamstrings, and
Yes. Thank
that
you. You said it
that
right.
causes
Yeah. Go
me
ahead.
that causes it with the knees, because like what I
Yes.
noticed is, if you notice, like, and we were just talking about these two sports, we're talking about basketball. Basketball is a lot of stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. If your
Yes.
hamstrings are weak, right, you also are more prone to having knee pain, because
Yes.
the I don't know what the technical term is, but it's like, if you're in a quad dominant sport and your hamstring is weak,
Yeah.
a lot of time what ends up happening is that you end up putting that pressure on your knees. If you look at soccer,
Yeah.
right? If you look at soccer, they rarely have they actually have more hamstring injuries,
Yes.
and
So
and
some of
they
them, yeah, they do.
and they don't have ankle sprains, because in soccer you could get into a full sprint
Mhm.
more often than in basketball, right?
Yeah, they have more. Yeah, because they're covering more. Yeah. So yeah.
Mm.
So it's funny. It's funny that you said that, and it shows that you have a
I be
background in personal
I
training. You did your
I
thing.
be I be paying attention. But
No,
yeah,
you
what were
pay
you saying?
attention. That's good. Shout out to you for real. It's really good. But yeah, yeah, a lot of it's funny because when we have a lot of basketball players that comes in with knee pain, well, what we assess and what we see with most basketball players that comes in, they have weak hamstrings. And the thing they'll be like, okay, well, we at CoreXcellence, what we do is that we strengthen the hamstring. We don't stretch them really, unless
Mm.
unless it's they get assessed from they, they get assessed from the athletic therapist that says due to a certain reason they have to stretch it. Most of our athletes don't stretch their hamstring. We put a lot of emphasis on like strengthening the hamstring, which also is gonna help opening up the hips, and it's gonna
Mhm.
make sure that like your quads are less tight also. So that's why, yeah, it's
It
really
releases
important to take.
it releases the pressure off the quads.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because when you think it's like it's the hamstrings are already for most basketball players and athletes that play
Like
in
a high
an
level.
elite level at an
Yeah.
elite level. What we see is that their hamstrings are lengthening for most of them, and it's tight in the front. So you have to strengthen the hamstring and stretch the quads. So that's what you
Mm.
have to do. You have to stretch the quads. So it's
Mm.
not the hamstring that you have to stretch, but yeah, it's like what I always say that hamstrings are like your insurance for your knees.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Ooh-wee. Y'all got this one. Y'all got this one. That's a bar right there. Okay. Whew. Thank you so much, Melvin. Final question I have for you.
go
Um,
ahead.
in terms of training, right?
Mhm.
What is, let's say, one thing that if you had to pick one thing, if
Mhm.
the main important thing,
I
right?
mean,
What would
okay,
be what would be the one thing that you would have basketball players focus on this offseason?
like an exercise, or you mean an
It could
exercise?
be any way you want. It could be an exercise, could be a part of the body, anything. They have to focus on one thing.
I mean, during the summer, the basketball players like they play a lot. I would say if you don't want knee problem, if you want the least amount of knee problem, strengthen your hamstrings.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. And
Yeah.
yes, just start training because yes, if you want to start if you want to improve your vertical jump, yes, you can go on the court and just start jumping as much as you want, but you have to take care of also like the athletic development also, which is
Yeah.
in a training facility.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, Melvin Kenny. Melvin, where can people find you? Do you have any final thoughts, or where can people find you on social media or whatever? Throw your business out there. the business card, whatever. Where can
So
people find
I
you?
mean, if people like, I guess the biggest lesson I would give to basketball players, if you want to improve your vertical jump, you have to go on the court and jump, because jumping is a skill. So work on your jumping mechanics, and then on top of that, add the athleticism, so athletic development. Put them
Mhm.
both together, and you'll jump at your full potential. So that's what I would say. And if you want guidance, you can find me at CoreXcellence, and I'm surrounded by a good team. So if when it comes to training, you can reach out to me at melvin.kenny33 on Instagram. And if you need the guidance to get treated, we have also a clinics, which is the CoreXcellence clinic. So
Mhm.
I'm surrounded by a good team.
Mm. Melvin Kenny, you are a star. Keep up what you're doing. It's a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy. I know I caught you during your break, or so. Thank you for taking the time, man. Appreciate it.
Nice, appreciate it. And I hope I've been valuable to your audience.
Appreciate it.